how do you see the social impact of Gestalt therapy nowadays?
The social impact in the larger field.
In the larger, very larger field, considering that the new generation and the Gestalt is really spread nowadays in the last 20 years more than before, and the social media effect and things, so really regarding to the planet, we can say.
I think that's a complex question, or at least the answer is a bit complex for me. Because on the one hand, Gestalt therapy has a fundamental root in social action, in that the larger field is part of the world that the human beings exist in. So to say Gestalt therapy can't be political means to deny that we are field-based. So of course we need to be political, and we have that legacy from Paul Goodman, from Fritz Perls, from Laura Perls, being involved, interested, and active in social change and rebalancing the inequities in the social and political world. On the other hand, we also have a tradition in Gestalt therapy of being process-oriented and not looking for a directionality, not looking for a particular end point. We're not trying to help people or make people turn out to look in a certain way. We want to maintain the creative indifference. It's not that we don't care, but it's that we're not invested and advocating a particular outcome. Those two traditions can be in conflict with each other, of wanting to deal with rebalancing the environment and the larger field, and the other having to do with not having a directionality, not wanting to have a bias to privilege being this way is better than that way. For me, the dilemma is solved when I look at it that social action is not individual therapy. In individual therapy, I don't want to have an agenda for you. But in dealing with the world, I do have an agenda for me. And I do have an agenda for you, not to change you, but I may not even know you, but I want you to have an equal opportunity in this world as a woman, or as an old person, or as a person of color, or as LGBT, etc. As financially disadvantaged versus people who are very advantaged. So I do want to respect my values as well. And it's not therapy then with an individual. You could say it's therapy at a higher level of organization, at the geopolitical level, but it's not individual therapy. It's more about my values and what fits for me, rather than helping you find out what fits for you. They're two different activities within the same domain.
Yeah, but I also think that if we are thinking in individual level, and as more individual is able to get the kind of Gestalt thinking and methodology and lenses to the world, the more people will be acceptable for the others, for the gender or financial or color, skin color problem. And then that's why Gestalt can a little bit larger field, even we work on an individual level.
Absolutely. And there are some people who believe that that's where the focus should be, on the individuals. I believe it should be both. It be on the individual and the individual work, helping that person restore their self-regulation in their environment. And the part about self-regulation in your environment is where those social and political issues will come in. So that the goal is not just to work at the individual level. I think that's important, but I think the larger field, that level of organization is also important to be involved in.
Yeah, thank you. So I do appreciate your worldwide work. You travel for different not only countries, but continents, and spread the knowledge and the experience. It's so wonderful, your
Yeah.
work.
And what's so unique and special about Gestalt therapy is, since we work with process and we're trying to help people self-regulate always within their environment, not in my environment. We're not trying to make Japanese people emotionally expressive. That's not our job. Our job is to help anybody to deal with how they interact with their environment that supports self-regulation.
Yeah.
And it would be different for different people in different places and different times of their life.
Yeah. So a little bit connecting question. My next question is, what do you think, what Gestalt therapy represents in the world? The therapy itself, what represents in the world?
Well, I think in the therapeutic world, Gestalt therapy has a lot of influence that does not usually get acknowledged. For example, the importance of the relationship between the therapist and the client. That was never important in early behaviorism, and it was never important in, excuse me, turn it off. And it was never important in psychoanalysis. The transference was important, but not the relationship. There was no relationship other than transference. And in CBT, it certainly wasn't a part. And nowadays, the relationship is the center of most therapies, if not the center, very important. Even CBT deals with some of that now. And contemporary psychoanalysis is dealing now with the relationship in the room, the intersubjective relationship, as they call it, that was never an important part of classic psychoanalysis or classic behaviorism. The behaviorist was, CBT forerunner was just a kind of a someone who held the clipboard with the directions, a traffic policeman or something, but had nothing to do with it personally. And now most therapies value the relationship and use the relationship in some way for the therapeutic endeavor. The research is very clear that about 30% of the variance of whether therapy is successful by whatever criteria is used, about 30% of the variance is related to the relationship. The strength of the relationship, that kind of relationship, but it's no longer, now that came from Gestalt therapy. Early in the 1930s, that was a very, almost hierarchical, not hierarchical, heretical. It was heresy to talk about a real relationship between the people. And one of the things that people frequently ask me is, does Gestalt therapy deal with transference? And of course we deal with transference, but we don't usually call it transference. What we're talking about is a part of character where perceptions are fixed from another time and are transferred over to the therapist. That's transference, but it's part of character. It's a process. And Freud's genius was that he discovered that patients did that with the analyst. Harry Stack Sullivan went further and he said they don't just do it with the analyst, they do it in the world. He called it parataxic distortion. What that means is they had a fixed way of perceiving, a fixed gestalt of perceptually organizing, making meaning, that they move over to someone else. In psychoanalysis, it was called transference. It is a transfer, of course, but it's a fundamental part of character. The fixed ways of perceiving and making meaning is what's being transferred to a new situation where it doesn't fit.
Yeah.
So I think we have a tremendous influence about the relationship, about the importance of the relationship, about process, rather than just dealing with the results of how I perceive and react. The results, which are my everyday problems, of course, those are important, but it's not enough just to deal with those. What's important is to deal with what are the processes that of my contribution to interacting with my world that creates these results that I don't like. Otherwise, therapy never ends. And one of the goals of therapy for me is for therapy to become self-sustaining. So the client can go on and deal with issues, because there will always be issues in life. It's not just dealing with the flower of the tree, it's dealing with the tree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what I appreciate in Gestalt therapy is that it works with awareness, high awareness, and as higher the awareness is, as much the client or we all are able to look at our projections, and we have a choice how to.
Yes, to look at the projections, if that's my process, to look at my interruptions, what process, what pattern, what configuration, how do I interrupt my self-regulation? And rather than trying to fix each interruption, we are trying to bring the interruption up into awareness.
Yes, yes, thank you. So I'm very curious, Bob, if we can go back in time a little bit, and would you share something about at the very beginning, when you get in touch with Gestalt, what attracted you really to Gestalt methodology and practice?
When I think of that question, I think of my grandson, who's 6 years old, and last year he started kindergarten, or maybe this year, early this year. And at the end of his first day, his mother and father said, "Did you like kindergarten?" He said, "Yes." And they said, "What was his favorite part?" And he said, "The school bus." And I think the bus is still his most favorite part of kindergarten. My favorite part of Gestalt therapy is I was so surprised to find a place where I was allowed to be me. And it was more than allowed. I was encouraged to be me. That I was very uncomfortable in the role of the therapist or in the role of the doctor. This was in a medical setting at that time at UCLA neuropsychiatric. And I was wearing a white jacket all day, and I felt like an imposter. There was nothing real. I couldn't be there as a person. And then I came upon Gestalt therapy where they wanted to know where I was. Jim Simkin was the first person I had contact, and then Fritz Perls. And they both really wanted me to be there, not a therapist or someone who talks funny. And that's what really attracted me. The rest was important intellectually, but personally, being able to be who I was, so I didn't have to hold my breath all day in a role playing therapist. That was just refreshing and delightful.
Mm-hmm. Sounds great. So we can jump a little bit back to the present, and I'm very curious what you are working currently, even beside you work and travel a lot and teach a lot. What is your main topic in professional life, in your professional life?
Films. Individual therapy films that I released a couple of years ago, 8 of them. And my wife, Rita Resnick, and I are working on couples films, and we have 2 or 3 already done and edited that will soon be released for our model of couples therapy that I've been developing for over 50 years, and Rita for 35 years, because as I usually say, she's much younger. I have to say that part. And so we're working on films for couples therapy, and I'm working on the individual films, and we're still filming at our summer program, which is where we make the films. Last night I gave a presentation here at the University of Palermo in Buenos Aires. I thought the University of Palermo would be in Italy, but no, it's in Buenos Aires, in the Palermo section. And it was 2 graduate students. And the professor invited me to spend 2 hours, and there must have been about 75 graduate students. And that's the audience that I want to reach, not just Gestalt therapists and not just therapists of other orientations, but graduate students, which is why we have the film subtitles in many languages, like 15 languages now, because we want to reach graduate students who are becoming therapists and counselors to be able to consider the Gestalt approach, our model of individual therapy and of couples therapy, last night was individual therapy, and integrate it with what they already know. Not to throw away what they already know, but to discriminate and use what they have from psychoanalysis, from cognitive behavior therapy, from Rogerian, and to integrate it with what fits for them to be a self-regulating organizing of their theory and their clinical practice. So that's what excites me, is being able to have that influence. And I've been working with this film project for decades. Yeah, I have the language translating is wonderful, which I want to thank you for contributing to the Hungarian translations that are going on. Thank you so much. Because I also want to reach Hungarians.
Very welcome. It is for me like working with videos, seeing your huge work with it during the decades. It's like in a kind of keep going Fritz Perls heritage, because he was the first, as I know, really filmed a real therapeutic sitting from the beginning to the last minute, right?
Yes, yes.
So it's like really what you do is, for me, it's very much linking back to Fritz Perls' work with Gloria and Youth Basic Films, you know.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. That's the similarity. The difference is that Fritz organized within his world at his time. So the organization that he made to organize therapy, what to emphasize, was of his time, and he drew from everything that was in the environment, different approaches, etc. There was nothing new, and Fritz was very clear, nothing new. What was new was the organization. And that's what keeps Gestalt therapy alive, that organization is constantly changing. Because it's fresh, because the world is changing, the field is changing, people are changing, so that the organization, to stay relevant, has to change too. If it doesn't, it becomes a kind of transference, a sociological, characterological freezing of what used to fit to be good therapy, which in another country or in another era doesn't fit so well.
Yeah.
So I appreciate continuing that tradition, but the tradition is not of the sameness, it's a process tradition rather than a content tradition.
Yeah, and sorry if I was a little bit confusing, but I really think very, so you just formed the sentences much better than I did.
And now something really important, I have to blow my nose.
It's important, it's a need in the field. Yes. Bob, can you just speak a little bit, if you are thinking in fertile void, which is the main topic of the conference? It's kind of back in time for a long time, but nowadays it is very much in our site. So fertile void, as how is it in your work, in your job, in your life, how effect it has, if there is. So how do you experience it?
What's important to me about what's called the fertile void is being able to stay with not knowing when you don't know. Whether that's about where therapy is going to go with an individual client, being able to be with that person without knowing what will happen next. To be, as I saw on the website for the conference, to be open to be surprised, rather than to have to prematurely codify and change and organize and make something happen, but to be able to stay with not knowing when you don't know, rather than filling in, waiting for the situation to ripen and to evolve. So where will Gestalt therapy go in the next 50 years? I don't know. But I know I have some concerns. I know I have some things that I think are important. I know that I see some things that I think are problems, but I don't know where it will go. That's more at a macro level. At a micro level, sitting with one client, when I share their impact on me with them, I have no idea what will happen next. To be able to trust that something will happen, and even if it's something difficult or even bad, if I'm willing to stay there, I can deal with it and that person can deal with it. I don't have to be afraid of making a mistake. As long as I'm willing to own my part of that, if there is a rupture or if there is a difficulty. So the fertile void leaves open more possibilities because you're not trying to know before you know. Trying to know before you know is very limiting. It will limit the outcome, will limit what's possible to happen. So that's the fertile part of the void. The void part of the fertile void can be either exciting or it can be terrifying. That it's so void, there's so much space that I have no idea where to walk, what to do, what to say, how to be. But that edge of staying with what I know and staying with what I don't know, being open to possibilities, is what makes life exciting. Yeah. Otherwise, might as well die. I mean, because, you know, we all are only here in the existential sense for a short amount of time, and then it's over. The experience until that time is called life. I once had a client, a couple, and his wife wanted to go on vacation, and he never wanted to go on vacation. And she was pressing him of why he doesn't want to do that. And he finally said, "What's the point of going on vacation? You only have to come home." What's the point of living? You only have to die.
For me, it's so interesting in fertile void that at the beginning, I was thinking in one of the stages in the Gestalt cycle as a and nowadays I see when a Gestalt therapist is a masterpiece, as you on your films, and I really see how it is in the field that we just sitting with the not knowing, and it's really need a huge courage, which is very difficult to get. So that's
I think a lot of people respond to the power of silence, being able to be there without having to say something or having to do something. And something always emerges. It will emerge either from the client, or it will emerge from the therapist, or it will emerge in the in-between, or there will be a car's horn outside, but something will emerge. Mm-hmm. And when you trust that, then being with the silence is not scary anymore. Well, it's not so scary.
Yeah. But the life is squared. Yeah. It's really wonderful to hear all these words, and it assures me that what a wonderful field I am with this Gestalt field. What would you have a message to the participants of the conference? Anything you think you really want to say to them directly as participants?
Well, I really encourage people in the Gestalt world, and hopefully a few from the outside Gestalt world, to come to the conference in Hungary. Hungary is a lovely country, and Budapest is a beautiful city. I love it. I love the architecture. I love the people. I love the food. I always love the food. And it's just lovely. Architectural jewels on every street, it seems, there. The conference, I think, is a place where you can, as I was talking about graduate students before, this would be full professionals, who come with what they know and be open to hear something different, to be open to taking in this piece and that piece and reorganizing it with your ground, your background of experience, your background of training, and integrating so you come up with your own organization of Gestalt therapy rather than I do it this way. Because then it's over. It's a finished product rather than a product in process, always in process. And I think the EAGT conference is a wonderful place to get different points of view, to hear some people talking about intersubjective, other people talking about process and awareness, other people talking about atmosphere, other people talking about integrating CBT with Gestalt and working with anxiety. I mean, on and on and on. It's the differences where we learn. Awareness comes from difference. It's the only place you can be aware is when there's difference. So if you can expose yourself to difference and be willing to consider rather than know or swallow whole, either of those extremes are not very useful, but to be able to engage difference is where growth happens. So a EAGT conference is a wonderful place to do that if you're a psychotherapist and especially if you're a Gestalt therapist.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob. What plans do you have for the next year?
For the next year, working on couples films, some more work on individual films, and Rita and I are doing a lot of training and teaching and traveling. We have small private practices now. We have made them much smaller because we're not doing more training, but we're doing it a bit slower, taking a bit more time. Since a few people have told us that we're not getting any younger. One woman said she better come to the summer residential because we might die soon.
Oh my God.
Many people say that, but they say it much more politely. She was very direct with it, which was refreshing, actually. So we're traveling more, and doing a lot of training and teaching, working on the films, small private practice in LA, which of course is a different practice because we're not there on a regular basis, so we can't offer consistent therapy. We can only work with people where it fits to be consulting with them when we are in Los Angeles. I still have ideas about writing, but I don't know if I will do it, so I don't want to say I will. But I do have ideas about that.